So even though economists disagree on many things, such as healthcare, financial regulations, and minimum wages, there's one issue that almost every economist would agree on, and that is rent control. So over 90% of the economists would say that rent control will actually hurt the renters and the society overall in the long-run perspective, because it would reduce both the quantity and quality of housing available. So from our welfare analysis in our last video, you can clearly see that after the price ceiling or maximum price is imposed, the total producer surplus decreases, and only part of the consumers, typically those who are more well-off, will benefit, but not those poor families who actually need affordable housing. Right? So that will end up with more people in the city becoming homeless, and overall, after we calculate the social welfare before and after the policy is imposed, we conclude that there is a loss to the society as a whole. So that's one piece of evidence that some people consider to use to advocate against a price ceiling on rental units. So some of the other evidences or arguments that we have already talked about are that the supply of the rental control units will likely to decrease because lower prices will lead to lower profits on the supplier side, and the landlords will have less incentive to invest in those affordable rent-controlled units. So this will shift the supply curve to the left and even widens the gap of shortage. So in the long run, as the suppliers want to reduce costs in order to maximize their profits, they will lower grade the service and maintenance in the rent-controlled units. That will then reduce the value of housing. And that's why we see most of the places where rent-controlled units concentrate are pretty bad neighborhoods. So for landlords, they're not really afraid of their bad housing service will likely to dissatisfy the renters who might consider moving out, because the shortage has already led to a long waiting list. There will always be people who want to get a house. So if we see this policy only from this pure economic perspective, most of the people will agree that this is perhaps a very bad idea. So it doesn't really make housing affordable for all of the people, and especially for the poor people, and it also ends up with so many other problems. And many of these problems are unexpected negative consequences. So why do many American politicians, in this case, still choose to impose this policy? And why are they convinced to put a maximum price on rental units? So remember when we began our first video in the series, we mentioned that society does not only consist with economics. So when we consider different individuals' incentive from other angles, we will perhaps understand why. So just imagine the researchers, they collect all the data that are needed and draw this welfare analysis model to the mayors of San Francisco or the candidates who are running a new election. And they'd be like, okay, I understand everything. So price ceiling will likely to reduce social welfare in the long run. I understand the welfare analysis model, but do they really have the incentive to get rid of the ceiling or the cap? So we might want to ask what their main goals or incentives are. So as politicians, they certainly hope to keep the majority of the people happy, right? And for those who are doing a campaign when an election is going on, they certainly hope to win the majority of votes in order to get elected, right? So most of the people, especially those who live in super expensive city like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and California, will choose to rent houses. So there are many renters in these urban cities, and these voters love maximum price on rent. So a great majority of the voters will believe that this policy will work for them. So simple as it is, rent pricing is way too high and government is currently cutting the price and hopes to provide a place to live for those people who have lower income. And you can't expect too many of the voters will have the patience to sit down and listen to an Econ 101 lecture on price ceiling, right? So a majority of the voters will not really consider the long-term picture and be able to foresee this negative impact of price ceiling on society as a whole. Because no one really tells them that price control might actually lead to bad quality housing, and it is certainly not a guarantee that you'll be able to get the house and oftentimes that will only benefit those who are wealthier as people turn towards other investments. For example, in luxury apartments and buildings, right? Those sectors that are more profitable. But for politicians, after doing some careful calculations, even though they understand that the pricing has negative effects, their bigger incentive is to win the election or keep people happy, right? So in urban areas, such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, NYC, the majority of the people are renters. So many people would rather be a lifelong tenant when housing price is skyrocketing. So one very important thing that the politicians need to get people to vote for them or like them is to impose policies that are popular among people. So consider that people are not fully educated on the mechanism behind rent control, and plus in the short run and immediate term, the renting price does go down, right? And most of the voters are short-sighted, as we have already mentioned. So this best option is to continue with this rent control policy to make most of the people happy. And imposing a ceiling doesn't really cost the government anything. When some of the rental units lose their value, the government might not be able to collect as many taxes as before, but the amount is not very huge. Okay, so next time we'll take another look at the London Economist article to see if we can now understand what's going on in the article a little better. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment down below. I will see you next time. Ciao.